We all are citizens of one nation or another, but each nation has its own rules for citizenship. Let's ponder over the thoughts that each of the nations have developed over the years and the struggle of independence which has led to the following thoughts. But before we begin, let's understand a very basic concept which says that there are a numerous stateless people or the migrants or the illegal migrants and refugees that are there. In that scenario, where do they find the citizenship? Is the state accepting them, making them the citizens, or the state expelling them is making them the citizens? We ever don't know. So there has been a big question whether universal citizenship or global citizenship should be given. So in this session, we would understand what is citizenship, the universal and the global citizenship, the Marshall's idea on citizenship, and then we would understand the India's laws of citizenship. So let's consider this as a scenario. Now here you have a set of refugees or a migrant laborers. They are moving from one country to another in search of job. They are trying to get accommodated to certain places, but ultimately what happens is they move around the globe, and as you can see, they are finding nowhere to live and they come back to their original place. But they are what are known as refugees, the stateless people or the illegal migrants who do not find any place to live. So when we are trying to understand about citizenship, it's very important that we focus on full and equal membership of political community and equal rights that are given. Now these refugees neither have full or equal membership nor have equal rights that are given. Again, state provides the political identity as well as the rights. Now what would happen? Let's say there is a scenario of Indians, Germans or any other nations and the nationalities. What would happen? The state is trying to protect its local people. So state is trying to protect, let's say India is trying to protect Indians, Germany is trying to protect Germans. So what is given? They are given certain rights that are there. Also, what is very, very important is they are basically protected when they are traveling. So travel is another important aspect that we consider. But these illegal migrants or refugees do not find any of these benefits, and therefore the struggle becomes very, very difficult, or their existence, we could say, becomes very, very difficult. In a democratic nation, what are the rights that are given? Now we all know those rights: right to speech, right to live, right to vote, right to livelihood, right to minimum wages, right to education. So all these rights are the rights which are imbibed to the citizen of a nation, and this has been achieved over a long period of history, and that has been through a difficult struggle for independence. Now, each of the nations had its own struggle for independence. The idea started back with the French Revolution in 1789, and it was then that if a nation wins the struggle for independence, then it could definitely bestow its people one of the best living conditions. So as a citizens, what do we understand? We understand interaction of one citizen to another citizen. We talk about citizens to whole of the society, and then we also focus on the legal and the moral obligations of the citizens that are there. Citizens are inheritors and trustees of the culture, of the natural resources that they are living with. So let's say you have a citizen from India, he would bring himself with the culture of India. A citizen of Germany would bring a culture of Germany. Or that is how we understand the whole idea of citizenship. But this idea of citizenship had its own important role, because what happened was over the years, we witnessed there was a division in the society. Now, this division in the society was either in the form of rich or poor, blacks or whites, literates or illiterates, and there is where you had the demarcation that existed into the society, or the dividing lines that were very, very clear. So, here we had an example of whites versus blacks. Let's talk about the case study first about South Africa. So, what happened in South Africa was whites had certain number of rights, but the blacks did not had. If the blacks wanted to enter the areas of white, they would have to arrange certain passes with them. They were not allowed to keep their families in the areas of white. They were not allowed to get right to vote, right to contest elections, right to elect government, right to have a representation, right to have a say in the political community. And therefore, we could say there was a lot of suppression that was seen. Similarly, was the case in United States when Martin Luther King became the leader, and in 1950s Martin Luther King laid down a very interesting scenario where he said there are three fundamental aspects that should be abolished, and once we are trying to abolish this whole inequality, why it is so. So the first is the self-worth of an individual. Each human being has his own dignity and that should be respected. Secondly, he believed that this social inequality is like a social leprosy, and it would have deep psychological wounds onto an individual feeling. The third important aspect is, if there are segregation laws, what would happen is people would be divided among themselves, and this would ultimately hamper the overall development of the nation. So, keeping in line these three objectives, the first of self-worth, the second of the segregation laws affecting the economic life and the development and prosperity of the nation, and the third important is this acts as a social stigma or a social leprosy, creating psychological wounds into the minds of those who are affected. So these three things needs to be checked, and it's only and only when these are taken into consideration the idea of equality would percolate deeper. Similarly, you had Marshall, who was a British sociologist, and in his book Citizenship and Book Class, a Social Class, he talked about the idea of citizenship. When he focused onto the idea of citizenship and providing full membership, he focused that citizenship should be given as a equal opportunity or equality to all, and this equality focuses on the quality of right, it focuses on the quantity of the people whom it is bestowed with. And with this thing in mind, Marshall came up with three rights that are most important for citizenship. And what are those three rights? The first right is the civil right, that individual is protected for his life, liberty and property, and that makes the civil right. The second is the political right. Political right implies that an individual has the right to participate in the democratic process or the process of governance that exists in the nation. And the last important is the social right, which says individuals should have access to education and employment. So two important criteria, education and employment. Now, Marshall's idea of these three rights was very, very fundamental because he saw social class as a system of inequality and citizenship assures equality. So, where you have citizenship, this class hierarchy would slowly and gradually melt away, it would dilute, and there would be a better integrated society that could be established. So, Marshall's law or Marshall's ideas on citizenship are very, very important, and again I repeat, his book was Citizenship and Social Class, which was written back in 1950s. So those are the important aspects. The next is, what is full and equal membership? Let's say there is a school bus going and you are an outsider. You have taken a new admission into this school. So every time you try to enter into the bus, what would happen is the students trying to throw you out. Why? Because you are an outsider, you are from a different school, and there is a probability that you can be a threat to that school. So what happens similarly is with a country or a state. The state does not try to allow the outsiders to enter. Similarly, countries do not allow outsiders to enter. They do not allow visa holders, and similar is the case of recent when we are talking about the lockdown scenario, the coronavirus spread across nations. What is happening? Each country is trying to limit its boundaries, and the idea is to give opportunity to their own nationals first and then allow the people from outside to enter. So whenever we are talking about outsides to enter, there are two things. What kind of people you are allowing to enter? Whether they are skilled manpower or they are the labor or the migrants. So these migrants would be either skilled or labor class. Now if they are highly skilled, super skilled, those who are affluent, influential, then definitely there would be higher probability that those would be allowed to enter. On the other hand, labor class, if it is required, if the local labor is not sufficient, then and only then you would allow them, and that too, that would be on low wages. There would be bad living conditions, improper hygienic conditions that would be there, and there is where you have a difference in the equal opportunities and the equal membership, what we say. So freedom of movement becomes very, very essential. Let's say we talk about a scenario of India, and then this Indian scenario, we have nurses coming from Kerala, we have lots and lots of IT workers in Bangalore, Cyberabad. So what is happening is there is a kind of interconnected space that we are focusing on. States are relying one onto another, and similarly nations are relying one onto another. So in this era of integration and globalization, the themes have changed, the ideas have changed, the way people work have changed, and also if they are not given equal rights, equal opportunities, what happens is there is protest that comes in. And what is this protest in the form of? It could be in the form of demonstrations, dharnas, it could be in the form of influencing the public opinion, talking about to media, focusing and highlighting the issues that have been going into the government. So equal rights become a paramount issue. Now equal rights, whom do we focus on? We focus on firstly the urban poor. So we focus on the stories of urban poor. First of all, the people living in the slum areas, and secondly, we focus on the tribals and the forest dwellers. Now let's understand each of these scenarios. Now these urban poor do not have a patch of land with them. So even if they want to have a right to vote, they want to have their name registered into the voter ID, they need to have a land where they are living on, and they cannot give pavement as their permanent address. So what happens is they are to deal with specific kind of issues that come up. Now most of the society is dependent on people living in these squatters or slums. The reason being, most of the hawkers, vendors, textile printers, laborers, domestic workers, plumbers, electricians are part of this squatter system or the slum ecosystem. Similarly, guaranteeing a basic minimum rights to them is important. If we talk on to the other hand, the scenario of tribals or the forest dwellers, they are dependent on the forest life. They are working on protecting their livelihood. They do not have any commercial interests that are there, but at the same time there could be conflicts with the group who are moving onto that area, and when they are moving, they would be affecting the life of the tribals, the forest dwellers. So equal rights need not mean a uniform policy for all. It would be a policy where those who need special powers, special rights should be uplifted, and the others should be kept at par. So the whole idea is, as we said in the previous class, to create a level playing field for all. And this level playing field would provide equal opportunities, equal rights, protection to all individuals and all citizens, and this would be one of the guiding principles of major government policies that would take place. So let's talk about some of the case studies. The first case study we focus on is the case study of India. Now in India, what happened was there was a public interest litigation, which was filed in BMC, the Mumbai Municipal Corporation, back in 1895 by Olga Tellis. And Olga Tellis basically said that these slum dwellers do not have any accommodation. If they are moved out from the slums or the squatters, where would they go? Because they do not have any alternative arrangements closer to their place of work. So as per the Article 21 of the Constitution, there was an amendment that was brought about, and it said that the Supreme Court said that the Constitution of India under Article 21 guarantees a right to life, which includes the right to livelihood. So first of all, right to live is important, and then right to livelihood, to earn their basic minimum income in order to sustain. So if a pavement dweller is forced to evict from the region where he is presently residing, he should be guaranteed an alternate accommodation or a shelter. And that was one of a very important clause that was brought here. So that was one of the case studies that we see in India. Similarly, you have case studies from the region of Zimbabwe in Africa. So here you have the region of Zimbabwe above the region of South Africa. Now what happened in Zimbabwe? Interesting idea is only 0.06% of the population is the white population. However, of the nearly 4,400 families which are living there, which are white, they account for nearly 32% of the agricultural land, and this is around 10 million hectares of the land. However, you have 1 million population which accounts for nearly 38% of the land, and this is the black population. So you can see how the difference actually is and where the equal rights are being compromised. So that is where we need to focus on the citizen and the nations. Now the whole idea of citizen and the nation evolved after the French Revolution, and French Revolution was one of the breakthrough revolutions in the world history which laid the ideas of independence deep rooted into the citizens. So there was where you had the idea of nation state that came in. This idea of nation state was indeed important because they considered the boundaries not just as territories, but it was a unique amalgamation of the culture and the history of a place. So what was important to understand the culture of a place, the history of the place, and how was this possible? This was possible through the flags, national anthem, the unique culture that they had, the ceremonial practices that they have, and a local dialect or a local language that they practice. And there was a kind of unity and binding that was present within the nations. So when we are trying to maintain a political identity which is shared by all the members of the state, it is very important idea to identify the state as such. Now what did France did? France basically considers itself to be a secular nation and an inclusive nation. So what happens is the private life or a personal life of an individual and the public life is different. And in your private space, you are free to practice any religion that you want. But when it comes to public, you have to adhere to the norms and assimilate yourself well into the public environment. So what happened was there were numerous controversial cases that came up where whether the Muslim women were allowed headscarf or not, should be allowed headscarf in the public places, whether Sikhs should be allowed to wear turban or not. And these were highly debated controversial issues in France. And later on they were not allowed. So what each of the nation state does is they try to protect their own culture, own unity, but they definitely allow, considering themselves to be secular, they allow you to practice certain ideas in your personal space or your private space. Now these citizenship rights again have lot of issues. Let's say if we talk about countries like Germany, Israel, there are various factors regarding the ethnicity, regarding your origin, which prioritize your citizenship. So let's say Germany has numerous workers coming in from Turkey. Now the workers who are coming in from Turkey have been there for centuries and for years, decades. If they have a children that are born in Germany, they are not given the nationality of Germany, and that is they are not granted automatically the citizenship just because of birth that takes place in Germany, and this issue is again debated. So what actually is citizenship, what are the criteria for citizenship is a big debating issue across nations, and each of the nations have tried to create their own boundaries, their own ideas behind it. So India is definitely a secular democratic nation state that exists, which aims to bind together people of different religion, culture, caste, ethnicity under one head. The partition of India, which took place in 1947, was a time where there was differences with Muslim League that arose, and there was a huge impact onto the common man, and a lot of suffering was witnessed during the time of partition that came up. The Constitution of India grants full and equal membership to the groups of different communities in India, be it scheduled caste, be it scheduled tribe, be it communities of Andaman and Nicobar Island, communities and tribal groups of Lakshadweep. All of them have equal and full membership, and they have equal rights, and this is well symbolized during our Republic Day parade. Now, what are the criteria for citizenship in India? So, India, we focus 5 basic criteria, that is citizenship by birth, descent, registration, naturalization, and incorporation of territory. Incorporation of territory is very simple. If certain part becomes a part of an Indian mainland, then the people residing in that region would automatically become a citizen of India. So this is one of the simplest of those. Now let's talk about each of those one by one. So let's first focus on the very first one, which is the birth. Now, there had been amendments that were there. The India Citizenship Act 1955 has been the basis across which you have the ideas that have been laid down. So from 1950 to 1987, the rule was that if a child is born in India, he or she would be considered as the citizen of India. After 1987 till 2004, the rule was if either of the parent is a citizen of India and the child is born in India, the child would be considered as a citizen of India. The next rule was after 2004, if the child is born in India and either of a parent is Indian but none of the parent is an illegal migrant, then the person would be considered as a citizen of India. So that is the citizenship by birth as per the Indian constitutional law. The next is the citizenship by descent. Now when we say citizenship by descent, we focus on those who were born outside India on or after 1950s but before 1992 would be considered a citizen of India if their father is a citizen of India. So here you have father as a citizen of India. However, after this 1992 to 2004, it was said that either of the parent is a citizenship of India, a citizen of India, and the third is after 2004, it was believed that the person who are born outside India shall not be considered an Indian citizen unless they are registered under the Indian diplomatic mission within 1 year of the birth. So if they are registered within 1 year of the birth, they would be considered as a citizen of India. The next is the process of registration. Now the process of registration is further interesting. A person who is residing here who is an ordinary resident for a period of 7 years or more can apply for registration. Minor children whose parents are citizens of India can apply for registration. A person of full age whose parents are registered in India can apply, who are a registered citizen of India can apply for registration. A person who is married to an Indian citizen can also apply for registration. And then a person who has been of Indian origin is an ordinary resident outside of India, outside the undivided India, in any of the part would be considered as applied through registration. And then overseas citizen of India for 5 years who has been residing in India for a period of 1 year or more would be considered as a citizen by registration. And the next important is by naturalization. So under naturalization we say that a foreigner who has acquired or who has been an ordinary resident of India for a period of 12 years. So any foreigner who is in India for a period of 12 years would be considered by naturalization as a citizen of India. And finally, incorporation of territory, which we already discussed. So the next important aspect that we focus on is the question of universal citizenship or the stateless people. Now, as we said, we have refugees across the globe, refugees from Asia, Africa, some of those who have the paid agents who smuggle them into the countries of, let's say, Europe or America, people who are displaced by famine, natural disaster, war scenarios. There have been numerous refugees in Darfur, numerous refugees from Afghanistan. So what would be the criteria? Who would provide them full membership? For those who work abroad, who apply for work abroad, or who are trying to apply for citizenship. Now there are no proper guidelines, and therefore to protect the rights of these stateless people or the state of stateless people, what we say, we have the UN Commission on Refugees that is there, and this Commission on Refugees makes sure that they are not harassed or tortured unnecessarily. We have numerous examples. You have the example of Rohingyas, Uyghurs, which we have covered in separate lectures. Very important to understand. Despite of the restrictions, despite of the walls that countries build up, the fences that countries build up, migration of people continue to take place. Now this could be because of war, famine, any kind of persecution that is taking place. So all these scenarios make people or basically force people to move from one place to another, and therefore what is a big question is whether there should be a global citizenship, what part of countries they should be, and across nations, across borders, there should be something that should be common in order to protect the rights of these individuals, where the people are linked across countries. What about their rights? What about their education, employment opportunities? So national citizenship should be supplemented when we are living in this closed, interconnected world. And there is where a very big question comes: what about the migrants and the illegal migrants and the refugees? What kind of benefits they should be given? There should be certain laws that should make it clear or make it enforcing for each of the nations to accommodate certain refugees that are there and give them the basic right, guarantee them the basic livelihood, and the state should, in order to make their lives comfortable, protect them and provide them equal rights and opportunities. So this was one of the major lectures, a kind of a lecture to ponder over how citizenship has come up with the thoughts of the struggle for independence that have evolved over the years, and each of the nations trying to restrict its boundaries from a threat of outsiders. And the concept of outsider insider has deepened so much that as Martin Luther King said, that it has created a social leprosy, and it's a kind of psychological wound onto the minds of those who are actually not finding equal rights and equal full membership in political systems. So that was about this lecture. We would be covering many interesting lectures in political science. Stay tuned. Have a wonderful day ahead.